At this part, we're going to literally just draw over our photo images of our different shots. I have my layer over here that I'm going to be drawing in. I'm actually going to double click on that and call it drawing one. But the conventions depend on if you're working on a studio or your own. I'm also going to right click on that and I'm going to give it a color. I'm going to give it a nice blue color just as an identifier. It has no effect on the color of what you're painting or anything. And this is a blank layer. I've created that just by pushing our new layer button here, and I've made it below our template and above our shots. So I'm going to be drawing over our shots in that case. So we're going to use the brush tool. The shortcut is B for brush. Please make sure you're on the brush tool, not the pencil tool, color replacement tool, and the mixer brush. The brush tool really is the one to be using for that. And if we go into this top panel here, you'll see there's a drop down where we can actually choose our different brushes. And you'll probably see it opening a little bit like this with a bunch of files. And we're going to jump into general brushes. While it is really cool to explore some of these brushes, we're going to keep it pretty simple for this. But before we do that, let's have a really quick look at these brushes. We've got things like soft round, hard round, soft round pressure size, hard round pressure size, soft round pressure opacity, hard round pressure opacity, and along with the others, there are multitudes, in fact, infinite amounts of brushes that can be created and used. We're going to keep it simple. These ones here that say pressure opacity or pressure anything means that they require something like a WACOM drawing tablet. And I'm going to select one here, for example, hard round pressure size. Here's my brush size here. It's going to come up in pixel size, and you can adjust that. And then when you do that, when we move onto our screen, and I'm going to click onto our screen, you can actually see the brush size there. If you aren't seeing that, maybe your brush is too small or too big, or you have cap lock on. If you have caps locked on, you will see just a target. So just make sure cap locks is off and you can see your brush width there. And with pressure size on, I'm just going to select, I'm actually going to move my drawing layer above the rest of all of them so I can actually see what's going on. I'm going to click on the color here and I'm just going to select, which I have already, a sort of a dark red. And if I draw with my mouse, it's just going to be a solid line. If I move over to my pressure sensitive tablet and I start drawing, what you'll see is I'm going to get a variance in the line based on how hard I press down. The maximum size is going to be the size of the brush that you create. Now, instead of going back to here and adjusting your size, there are a number of different ways of doing this, including shortcuts built into a lot of WACOM tablets. But also, my personal favorite is if you use these square brackets on your keyboard. And your square brackets, as I'm drawing in here, look like that. The one on the left reduces, the one on the right increases the size. And they're on the keyboard and they're next to the letter P. And if you hit those, they are going to incrementally increase or decrease your brush size, and you should be able to see that grow or contract according to that. So that's really cool. Now I'm going to actually just delete that drawing layer because I've scribbled all over it. I'm going to create a new one right at the top here just for demo purposes. And what I'm going to do, instead of using hard round pressure size, I'm going to show you a little bit about hard round pressure opacity. And this essentially means that the opacity of the brush, this is a soft round brush, it's going to have a blurry edge, is going to be based on how hard I press with my tablet. So as you can see, I can do really light, and if I press hard, it's going to come out with more opacity. So that's kind of very, very useful depending on what sort of techniques that we're going to be using. And a soft brush is going to have more of an airbrush type effect, whereas a hard brush, like this one here, is going to be more of a very hard edge. So figure out what's useful for you. There are some other options in brushes right here. And you can see here's a drop down here, and we've got things like shape dynamics and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of customization we can do for that. While we're here, I'm going to show you the eraser brush. If you do have an eraser on your WACOM, it could be on the other end, like an eraser on a pencil. Otherwise, press E for eraser, and that will bring it up here in your tablet, on your toolbar, sorry. And like the brush, you can also choose what style you have here. So you can even go soft, round, pressure, opacity, and adjust your brush size using the square brackets and use that as an eraser like that. So set up your brush beforehand before you start getting too carried away. In saying all that, I'm going to hit B for brush again. What I do highly recommend is that you only, for this part anyway, use either soft round or hard round brush for drawing and toggle some controls. So I'm going to select a hard round brush, and the reason for that is it does come in handy later on when we are filling in for color and stuff like that. So hard round brush, no pressure selected. Let's zoom in, so Command plus or Control plus if you're on a PC, and spacebar, and I'm going to zoom into my image here. I'm going to try to get the whole thing in there, so I might just grab my magnifying glass, and the shortcut for that is zoom, and I'm just going to zoom in by clicking, dragging left or right, and trying to get that to fit. Hit the spacebar to bring up my hand. I'm just going to try and fit that to the maximum part of my screen. I'm going to go back to my brush. Let's get a decent brush. Now I actually want to get a really small brush for this, but before I do that, I'm just going to show you this really important part. So remember, I've selected hard round brush, no pressure selected. Over here we've got some different modes. We'll get into those later, but what I really do want to show you is these two little buttons here. This one here follows opacity, and this one over here, if we hover over it right towards the end, is for pressure. So the two differences between that are, if I draw with a normal stroke, it's going to come like that. If I turn on opacity and use my WACOM, you can see I can now change the opacity of that based on pressure. If I turn that off and turn on size, for pressure for size, it is now going to have variance in size according to that. I can also turn on both of these and have something that's going to be a combination of both. So we do have some nice variances, and all it is about pushing these two buttons, either opacity or pressure. So really, really cool. I'm going to undo those marks. Like so, Command Z. And now let's actually start drawing. So as I said, I am going to use a hard round brush. I am going to turn on pressure for size, and I'm also going to play around with the pressure opacity. I'm going to reduce my brush size. I want to get something pretty small so that when I am drawing, it's not going to overdo it. And let's zoom in. Now we've got Tim Robbins here. When it comes to storyboarding, we want to draw pretty quickly. I'm using red because that's a traditional thing for getting a base layer to try and figure out. And we want to start thinking about drawing this as if we were drawing a storyboard without an image behind. So let's start by going, okay, well, he's got his head here, and I'm just going to draw the basic outline. I'm keeping this quite rough and light. I also want to think where his eyes are and the shape of his head. So I'm using this horizon line just to identify that. I'm then also going to give another line around here to give the center point hemisphere of his face. So when we're drawing storyboards, we need to get the ideas down really quick, and this is one of them. I'm going to draw in his eyes, how they're kind of, looking down. We can be a little bit creative, and also his nose information. His mouth's open, so I'm going to do that. I might just show a little bit of the teeth like that, maybe a little bit of the chin and eyebrows. Also his ears if possible. Let's start figuring out his body. So let me zoom out just a tiny little bit for this. He's holding onto these shoes or onto someone's leg, but let's start getting his body in. So his shoulders are over here, and we use just basic cylinders and things like that to try and figure out where the body is going. Now remember, when we're doing this in real time, we may not have a photo to work for. We definitely shouldn't have the actual finished shots from the film. That's not really how it's supposed to go. So as you can see, I'm just kind of do some really light drawing here, and I'm also going to draw in what I think the shoes might start looking like, and some shoelaces. Let's put in his bow tie because that's an important feature, and anything else that's going to be, maybe of some significance for our shots. He's got kind of a wavy hair sort of situation. Don't be afraid to adjust your brush size, but get the basic information through. Now that doesn't look great. I'm going to turn off the shots photo, and you can see that looks pretty average. I wouldn't win any awards with that, but it's getting the basic information. I'm also going to draw in some of the key components for the background. Now, if you're not very good at drawing straight lines, I have a little bit of a trick for you. It's called using the shift key. Now, this actually is in the tips and tricks option. But if you hold down use the shift key, you can actually draw straight lines. If I press the shift key, as I am now, and then click on a point and start drawing, it's going to allow me to draw a horizontal or vertical line. If I press down with my pencil first, or my WACOM first, take it off, press shift, and then click to another point, it will draw a line directly to there. With my finger on shift again, I'll press to another point, and you can see it will do straight lines to each section. Now, important thing to notice is that it will vary depending on whether you have flow or opacity on. So let's undo those. So if I do want to draw a straight line that does not have this, I'm just going to increase my brush size option where it's going to get these sort of little baseball bat things based on the pressure. Turn those options off. So let's take those off. I'm going to get my brush size down a little bit smaller again. I'm going to turn off pressure. I'm going to turn off opacity. And now keep an eye on your brush size. If I click in one point, press shift, I can go click, press shift, click, press shift, touch, click, press shift, touch, and very quickly I can get those points. It does take a little bit of practice sometimes, but you should hopefully find out that after a while you get very good, proficient doing that. And then once again, turn on your options as well to start getting the information. Toggle off the photos and make sure that you can get the basic information. You might need to clean stuff up with your eraser. Once again, your eraser works just like your brush tool, so you can choose whether or not it's going to, how it's going to erase by selecting the style of brush or anything like that. And of course, brush size, and we can start scribbling away through that. So as you go, we're just getting the real basics for this before we start refining. And as you go, start doing that for all of the images. Later on, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of those images and perhaps with a little bit of help of this, we're going to redraw over the top there with our darker layers, and then finally add some variation, dark to light, some values, so that we can really get our images to pop and look like decent storyboards. But the key part here is getting a composition, getting them look like characters, getting this crosshair sort of thing, and also figuring out what the body's actually doing. When we're doing storyboards, we really quite often don't have a lot of time to get the information out, and they also need to be quickly and easily almost disposable. So have a go with filling out those, and when in doubt, if you need to, if you're worried about destroying something, quite simply create a new layer, rename it, and away you go, and you can easily change and make adaptations as you go. All right, we'll catch up.